The original historic Knights Templar were a Christian military order, the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, that existed from the 12th to 14th centuries to provide warriors in the Crusades. These men were famous in the High and Late Middle Ages, but the order was disbanded very suddenly by King Philip IV of France, who took action against the Templars in order to avoid repaying his own financial debts. He accused them of heresy, ordered the arrest of all Templars within his realm, and had many of them burned at the stake. The dramatic and rapid end of the organization led to many stories and legends developing about them over the following centuries. The order and its members increasingly appear in modern fiction, though most of these references portray the medieval organization inaccurately. In modern works, the Templars generally are portrayed as villains, misguided zealots, representatives of an evil secret society, or as the keepers of a long-lost treasure. Several modern organizations also claim heritage from the medieval Templars, as a way of enhancing their own image or mystique. Modern organizations. Since at least the 18th century, Freemasonry has contained references to the Knights Templar, incorporating Templar symbols and rituals in a number of Masonic bodies. The most well-known reference to the Knights Templar in Freemasonry is the degree of Knight of the Temple, or Order of the Temple, the final order joined in the United Religious, Military, and Masonic Orders of the Temple and of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes and Malta, commonly known as the Knights Templar. Freemasonry is traditionally open to men of all faiths, asking only that they have a belief in a supreme being, but membership in this Masonic body, and others, is open only to Freemasons who profess a belief in the Christian religion. These Knights Templar often take part in public parades and exhibitions, wearing distinctive uniforms, and have had a number of high-profile members such as Henry Ford and Harry S. Truman. In the later 20th century, Masonic Knights Templar have become themselves the subject of pseudo-historical theories connecting them to the medieval order, even though such a connection is rejected by Masonic authorities themselves and the source known to historians. The Order of the Solar Temple is one infamous example of a Neo-Templar group, founded in 1984, that claimed descent from the original Knights Templar. There are several other self-styled orders that also claim to be descended from, or revivals of, the Templar Order. Another Templar-related order, the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, is a charitable organization founded in 1804 which has achieved United Nations NGO special status. They are a part of the larger Ordo Supremus Militaris Templi Hierosolymitani, OSMTH, commonly called Knights Templar International. Some members of the OSMTH claim to be the direct descendants of the original Knights Templar using the Larmenus Charter as proof. However, this document is suspected to be a forgery. Scholarly reception. The popularity of the Knights Templar in modern fiction and their presence in pseudo-historical or fringe literature has received scholarly attention. At the 2004 annual conference of the American Culture Association, their call for papers was specifically about such conspiracy theories relating to the Templars and their association with other legends and mysterious organizations. Literary theorists puzzle over Umberto Eco's use in his novel Foucault's Pendulum, of the Templars as a symbol of postmodernist rewriting of history. Historian Malcolm Barber writes that mystic Templars are omnipresent in all good conspiracy theories. On Day to Day, a program on American NPR, host Alex Chadwick discussed the literary fascination with the Knights Templar. In Poland, the Turin Museum had an exhibition entitled The Knights Templar, History and Myth, which offered a description. Apart from pieces of high art, the exhibit will grant equal importance to popular culture items, literature, film, internet content, exploring the subject of the Knights Templar. And in 2007, a National Post editorial noted that the Templars remain a living presence in popular culture. This has happened precisely because the historical record concerning their sudden annihilation in the early 14th century at the hands of Philip IV, the Fair, of France has been so sparse and ambiguous. Time and revolution have damaged and dispersed the sources, and made the Templars a magnet for speculation and imagination. Popular themes. Popular themes are their supposed association with the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, and the supposed historical connection to the Freemasons. The historical Templars had their first headquarters on the Temple Mount, which had been assigned to them by King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They were in operation there for 75 years. Pseudo-historical books such as the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail theorize that the Templars could have discovered documents hidden in the ruins of the temple, possibly proving that Jesus survived the crucifixion or possibly proving Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene and had children by her. Indeed, the supposition that the Templars must have found something under the Temple Mount lies at the heart of most Templar legends and pseudo-historical theories, also popularized by French author Louis Charpentier, 1966. There is no physical or documentary evidence, however, to support such a supposition. It is true that they are documented as having carried a piece of the true cross into some battles, but this was probably a portion of a timber that was discovered during the 4th century by Saint Helena, the mother of the Emperor Constantine. Relics and Treasure. There are various legends concerning a treasure that some Templars managed to hide from King Philip and that was later lost. One particular story concerns Rennes-le-Château, where a treasure was supposedly found in the 19th century. One speculative source for that treasure was the long-lost treasure of the Templars. In 1910 publication by one Joaquin Myret Wysens, the case is made that the Knights Templar hid and buried the great treasure in Vrana, Zadar County, because Ramon from Ciro near Granya del Pers in Noguera, Comarca, in Catalonia gave a generous gift to the Knights Templar into the hands of their Grand Master Arnold of Torroja. This Ramon was the son of Romana, the daughter of Benesmiro de Siponto, who was the Justiciarius of Monte Sant'Angelo and who was sent by Pope Alexander III as a notifier to Ibenique. Hugh J. Sconfield, 1984, argued that the Knights Templar may have found the copper scroll treasure of the Qumran Essenes in the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. He suggested that this might explain one of the charges of heresy which were later brought against the Knights by the medieval Inquisition. Holy Grail. The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, 1982, seems to be the source of the story that has the Holy Grail found by the Order and taken to Scotland during the suppression of the Order in 1307, where it remains buried beneath Rosslyn Chapel. A 2006 book claims that the Grail was instead taken to northern Spain, and protected by the Knights Templar there. Ark of the Covenant. Graham Hancock in his The Sign and the Seal, 1992, claimed that the Templars discovered secrets of the Masons, builders of Solomon's Temple, Zerubbabel's Temple, and Herod's Temple at the Temple Mount, along with knowledge that the Ark of the Covenant had been moved to Ethiopia before the destruction of the First Temple. Hancock claims that allusion to this is made in engravings on the cathedral at Chartres, the construction of which was greatly influenced by Bernard of Clairvaux, the Order's patron. Further links to both the search by the Order for the Ark and to its discovery of ancient secrets of building are supposedly suggested by the existence of the monolithic Church of St. George in Lalibela, Ethiopia, which stands to this day but whose construction is incorrectly attributed to the Knights Templar. Shroud of Turin. Another legendary object that is claimed to have some connection with the Templars is the Shroud of Turin. The shroud was first publicly displayed in 1357 by the widow of a nobleman known as Geoffrey of Charny, described by some sources as being a member of the family of the grandson of Geoffroy de Charny, who was burned at the stake with de Molay. In 2009, Barbara Frall, a paleographer in the Vatican secret archives, claimed that the Shroud of Turin had been kept by the Templars after 1204. Frall also claimed that the burial certificate of Jesus the Nazarene, imprinted in fragments of Greek, Hebrew and Latin writing, is visible on the shroud. The so-called Temple Combe painting, a painting discovered in 1945 by Mrs. Molly Drew in the roof of an outhouse of a cottage in Temple Combe, England, has been alleged to be a copy of the image on the Turin shroud, and therefore evidence of the Turin shroud being in the possession of the Knights Templar during its hidden years. The painting has been on display in St. Mary's Church in the village since 1956, the only Templar-related site to have survived there, and has been carbon dated to c. 1280. Some people believe that it is a Templar-commissioned image of either Jesus Christ or the severed head of John the Baptist, although it is without a halo. De Molay's curse. Malcolm Barber, 2006, discusses a supposed curse uttered by the last Grand Master of the Templar Order, Jacques de Molay, as he was burned at the stake in 1314. Jacques de Molay supposedly cursed Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, saying that he would meet them before God before the year was out. Pope Clement died only a month later. King Philip died later that year in a hunting accident. Further, within a short span of years thereafter each of Philip's sons died at relatively young ages, resulting in the end of the House of Capet, leading to disputes over succession and the 100 Years' War as different factions battled for the throne. Barber traces this story to a verse chronicle attributed to Geoffrey of Paris, La Chronique métrique attribuée à Geoffroy de Paris, ed. A. Devers, Strasbourg, 1956, pages 5711-5742. Geoffrey of Paris was apparently an eyewitness, who describes Molay as showing no sign of fear and, significantly, as telling those present that God would avenge their deaths. Albert Pike claimed the Knight Kadosh, the 30th degree within the ancient accepted and Scottish rite, commonly known as a vengeance degree, involved the trampling on the papal tiara and the royal crown, destined to wreak a just vengeance on the high criminals for the murder of de Molay. The figure of Hiram Abiff representing Jacques de Molay, with the three assassins representing Philip IV of France, Pope Clement V and Squin de Florian. Malcolm Barber has cited a Masonic legend that resembles Pike's claims, in Louis-Claude Cadet de Gassecourt le Tombeau de Jacques Molay, Paris, 1796, first edition. A series of mid-20th century novels, Les Rois Maudits, The Accursed Kings, by Maurice Drouin, which were first published in 1955, expanded on the story of the curse of Jacques de Molay and the French monarchy in the 14th century. Cursed, you'll be all cursed, until the 13th generation of your races will have disappeared. Maurice Drouin. A popular version of the legend attributes to the curse the death of Louis XVI, saying he belonged to the 13th generation after Philip IV. The 13th generation is in fact that of Louis XIV's children. A frequent recurring legend relates how when Louis XVI was guillotined, an anonymous French Freemason rushed from the crowd, dipped his hand in the king's blood, or grabbed the head and held it, and yelled, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." This story first appeared in the Illuminatus trilogy, a work of science fiction, in 1975. Claims of hidden survival. Supposed continuity in Freemasonry. Some historians and authors have tried to draw a link from Freemasonry and its many branches to the Templars. Degrees in the ancient and accepted Scottish rite such as the Knight of St. Andrew, the Knight of Rose Croix, and the 32nd degree in consistory make reference to a Masonic Knights Templar connection, but this is usually dismissed as being ceremonial and not historical fact. John J. Robinson argues for the Templar Masonic connection in his book Born in Blood, The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry, in which he alleges that some French Templars fled to Scotland after the suppression of the order, fearing persecution from both church and state. He claims they sought refuge with a lodge of Scottish stonemasons within which they began to teach the virtues of chivalry and obedience, using the builder's tools as a metaphor, and eventually they began taking in speculative masons, men of other professions, in order to ensure the continuation of the order. According to Robinson, the order existed in secret in this form until the formation of the United Grand Lodge of England in 1717. An example of Templar Masonic transitory symbolism can supposedly be found in Rosslyn Chapel, owned by the first Earls of Rosslyn, a family with well-documented ties to Scottish Freemasonry. However, Rosslyn Chapel itself dates from at least 100 years after the suppression of the Templars. The case is also made in Michael Begant and Richard Lee's book The Temple and the Lodge. However, historians Mark Oxbrow, Ian Robertson, Karen Rawls, and Louise Yeoman have each made it clear that the Sinclair family had no connection with the medieval Knights Templar. The Sinclairs' testimony against the Knights at their 1309 trial is not consistent with any alleged support or membership. In The Templars and the Grail, Karen Rawls states that among some 50 who testified against the Templars were Henry and William Sinclair. Knights Templar in Scotland. Since the 1980s, there has been a growing body of publications in both popular fiction and pseudo-history which construct a continuity between the historical presence of the Knights Templar in Scotland with the emergence of Masonic Scottish Knights Templar in the early modern period. The idea of an association with Rosslyn Chapel originates in the 1982 The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and entered mainstream pop culture with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, 2003, reinforced by the subsequent film of the same name, 2006. Numerous books were published after 2003 to cater to the popular interest in supposed connections between Rosslyn Chapel, Freemasonry, the Templars, and the Holy Grail generated by Brown's novel. The tale of a missing Templar fleet is supposedly based on the protocol of the interrogation of Jean de Chalons by the Inquisition. He claimed that he had heard that preceptor of the French Templars, Gerard de Villers, had been warned of his imminent arrest. De Villers had escaped with 50 horses and 18 galleys. De Chalons' son, Hugues de Chalons, escaped with him carrying the wealth of his uncle, Hugues de Perraud. In Begant and Lee's The Temple and the Lodge, the fleet carried the treasure of the Paris Preceptory of the Templars. Scotland became the destination of the fleet over 4 centuries later, in the claims of George Frederick Johnson, an exiled Jacobite living in Austria. Johnson, however, turned out to be a fraudster who was probably called Johann Samuel Lookett. After a checkered career based on alchemy and forgery, Johnson convinced a Masonic lodge in Jena that he possessed the highest secrets of Masonry, and having declared the rest of German Masonry irregular, brought a surprising amount of lodges under his control. Exposed as a fraud by Karl Gotthelf von Hund in 1764, he was later apprehended by a previous victim, and spent the rest of his life in prison. Hund's initial attraction to Johnson was spurred by a need to find his own superiors. He had been received into the Order of the Temple by high-ranking Jacobites in Paris during 1743, being introduced to Charles Edward Stuart himself. After the failure of the 1745 rebellion, his masters were either in hiding or dead, and had lost interest in maintaining their Templar offshoots, leaving Hund with a depleted ritual book which he had to reconstruct from memory. As Johnson's collection of lodges now looked to him for leadership, the rite of strict observance was born. Again, the foundation myth alleged that Freemasonry was started by Templar refugees under the protection of Robert the Bruce. This time, they had travelled from France through England disguised as stonemasons, and their use of Masonic symbols in their allegories paid tribute to this deception. Under Hund's leadership, the rite of strict observance became the most popular branch of Freemasonry in the German states, with lodges all over continental Europe. However, Hund's continuing inability to produce, or even contact his unknown superiors led to increasing dissatisfaction. 6 years after his death, a convent meeting in Wilhelmsbad from 1782 to 1783 finally agreed that Freemasonry had no connection to the Templars, and strict observance ceased to exist, most lodges being absorbed into the rectified Scottish Rite. For most of the previous 2 decades, the most common foundation myth among German Masons stated that Freemasonry came from the Knights Templar, protected and allowed to flourish in Scotland. In 1815, Claude Thory, a respected French scientist and Freemason, claimed that Robert the Bruce had created the Order of St. Andrew for Masons who had supported him at Bannockburn, which was later joined to the Order of Heredom, which he founded at Kilwinning. In 1837, a Scottish Freemason called James Burns, in attempting to revive a Scottish order of Knights Templar, expanded the Masonic link to Bannockburn. He introduced the Knights Templar as the bearers on Freemasonry to Scotland, and had the Templars play a crucial part in the battle. This appears to be the basis of subsequent tales of Templar involvement at Bannockburn. The contemporary Royal Order of Scotland makes use of a similar foundation myth, which is no more intended to be taken as historical fact than any other piece of Masonic allegory. Discoverers of the New World. Holy Blood, Holy Grail, 1982, further embellished the Lost Fleet topos discussed above, alleging that the Templars in these ships fled to the New World by following old Viking routes, i.e. making one of the pre-Columbian voyages to America. Since the popularization of Holy Blood, Holy Grail with the commercial success of Dan Brown's 2003 novel, there have been numerous allusions to this idea in American pop culture. A supposed Templar treasure in Oak Island, Nova Scotia, Canada is featured in the 2004 movie National Treasure starring Nicolas Cage. As early as 2001, historian Helen Nicholson in A Popular History of the Templars dispels the idea that the Templars could spare ships to indulge in world exploration. The Templar Code for Dummies, 2007, also points out the historical implausibility of this scenario. Friday the 13th. There is a modern urban legend to the effect that the tradition of Friday the 13th being unlucky originates with the date of the simultaneous arrest of many Templars at the behest of Philip IV on Friday, October 13, 1307. Notable examples. Novels and comics. A brief list of some works which have featured the Knights Templar. Ivanhoe, an 1820 novel by Sir Walter Scott, has as its villain Sir Brian de Bois Guilbert, a Templar Knight. The Paradise of Bachelors and the Tartarus of Maids, an 1855 short story by Herman Melville treats the Templars with great irony. Mumbo Jumbo, 1972, has a Templar knight Hinkle von Vampton who serves as the main villain in Ishmael Reed's postmodernist satire. Les Rois Maudits or the Accursed Kings, 1973 et sec, by Maurice Drouin depicts the death of the last Grand Master of the Order, and plays with the legend of the curse he laid on the Pope, Philip the Fair, and Guillaume de Nogaret. Foucault's Pendulum, a 1988 novel by Umberto Eco, which features the mythos of the Knights Templar as keepers and defenders of the Holy Grail. Swedish author Jan Guillou has written a trilogy about Arne Magnusson, 1998 et sec, a fictional Swedish character from the Middle Ages who was forced to become a Knight Templar, went to Jerusalem and after returning to Sweden, was a leading military figure shortly before the time of Birger Jarl. Catherine Kurtz has written many books with Templar characters and themes, and edited The Crusade of Fire, 2002, Anthology. The Da Vinci Code, best-selling 2003 novel by Dan Brown. This was also adapted into a film version in 2006. The Last Templar, 2005, by Raymond Carey is a Da Vinci Code-style thriller. The Revenge of the Shadow King, 2006, by Derek Benz and J.S. Lewis, relates an alternate history of the Knights Templar, aligning them with an age-old order whose primary role is to defend the world from the powers of darkness. In this book, the Templars still exist and operate today from the shadows of an underground organization. The Templar Legacy, 2006, by Steve Berry is a story which revolves around the possibility that the Templar treasure is close to being discovered, and that it may fall into the wrong hands. In this book, the treasure is closely connected to the question of Christ as the Savior, and Christ's resurrection. The book also brings into question the contents and significance of the treasure. Robert Jordan's fantasy series The Wheel of Time contains the fictional Children of the Light, a militant religious order who consider themselves above the laws of nations and are recognizable by the snowy white cloaks from which the nickname White Cloak is derived. Their primary military units are heavy cavalry, possibly supplemented by the more regular army of the nation Amadicia, the seat of their power. Film and TV. A series of horror films, Tombs of the Blind Dead, Return of the Blind Dead, The Ghost Galleon, Night of the Seagulls, by Spanish director Armando de Osorio depict the Knights Templar as resurrected mummies in search of human blood. The mythos of the Knights Templar, presented as the fictional Knights of the Cruciform Sword, as keepers and defenders of the Holy Grail, is also a central plot point in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, 1989. Dolph Lundgren plays the role of a modern-day member of the Knights Templar in the 1998 movie The Minion. The film Revelation, 2001, in which the Order tries to clone Jesus Christ for evil purposes. The Templar Knights are featured in the 2001 French film Le Pacte des Loups, in which the symbol of the Templar Knights is seen upon the walls of an old Templar stronghold and upon the beast's armor. The cult scene in the movie is also supposedly a rogue Templar organization, originally sent by the Pope to teach the King of France a lesson. Carnivali, 2003-2005. National Treasure, 2004. Kingdom of Heaven, 2005 shows the last king of Jerusalem, Guy de Lusignan, and his henchman, Reynaud de Chatillon, both of whom were not members of the Templar Order, as Templars. Arn the Knight Templar, 2007. Arn the Kingdom at Road's End, 2008. The Last Templar, 2009, an adaptation of Raymond Curie's novel about a New York archaeologist researching the lost secrets of the medieval Knights Templar. Ironclad, film, 2011. Nightfall, History Channel's medieval drama scheduled to premiere December 6, 2017. Music. Knights of the Cross is a concept album about the Templars by German metal band Gravedigger. The Templars, band, a New York City oi band, is inspired by the Knights Templar. Similarly, their record label, Temple Combe Records, is named after a Knights Templar site in Somerset, England. Hammerfall, a Swedish power metal band, refer to themselves as the Templars of heavy metal, making frequent reference to the Templars on many of their albums. Games. Broken Sword, The Shadow of the Templars, 1996, was the first video game to reference the Knights Templar. Broken Sword, The Sleeping Dragon, 2003, and Broken Sword, The Angel of Death, 2006, involve the Templars as well. Time Gate, Knight's Chase, 1996. Utilizing material from the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the third Gabriel Knight game, Gabriel Knight 3, Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned, 1999, posits both an alternative history of Christ and the suggestion that the Templar treasure, buried in France's Languedoc, is Christ's remains. Templars feature in Deus Ex, 2000, and Deus Ex, Invisible War, 2003. As with Broken Sword, the plot is derived from the Illuminatus trilogy. Stronghold, Crusader is set in Middle East during the Crusades. In Lionheart, Legacy of the Crusader, 2003, a fictionalized version of the Knights Templar appear as a playable faction and play a major role in the game. Knights of the Temple, Infernal Crusade, 2004, by TDK and Starbreeze. Knights of the Temple 2, 2005, the sequel to the Starbreeze-developed game by Cauldron, published by PlayLogic. In Medieval 2, Total War, 2006, most Catholic factions can train Templar units into their armies or hire them as mercenaries while on a crusade. In Hellgate, London, 2007, has a Templar class and makes numerous references to connections between the Freemasons and Knights Templar. Ions, 2008, tanking role warriors are called Templars. Dragon Age series features a mage and demon hunting organization called Templars. They serve the Chantry, a Dragon Age version of Catholic Church. The Black Templars chapter of the Space Marines from the Warhammer 40,000 tabletop wargame are based directly on the historical Knights Templar. The First Templar, 2011, the plot revolves around Templars and the Holy Grail. In the Secret World, 2012, Templars is one of the 3 playable factions. In the Protoss faction of StarCraft are 2 units labeled as Templars. The High Templar is a caster unit, while the Dark Templar is a stealthy assassin unit. The games Infinity Blade and Infinity Blade 2 for iOS on Apple's iPhone, iPod Touch, and iPad features an enemy referred to as Knight Templar. The Assassin's Creed series features the Assassins as the protagonists and Templars as the main antagonists. The series borrows heavily from Templar history and legends, and incorporates elements of Illuminati conspiracy theories into its canon.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.